Good afternoon, friends. So we are here with the MCQ discussion as before. I know it sounds too much clear, but yeah, we can have this discussion again. So it's a case of an electrical injury if the contact with the electrocuting surface is poorly established. The skin lesion that develops is called. And yeah, see, I know there is so much noise here because of the construction work. So yeah, it's a question is there is an electrical injury in this case, and if the contact with the electrocuting surface is poorly established, so the skin lesion that develops is called as it's a crocodile skin, jewel burn, bone pearl, or it's a spark lesion. So anyone know if you want to answer? Am I audible first? Because of the construction here, it's not that much audible. I think so. Yeah, I will repeat the question again. It's a case of an electrical injury. If the contact with the electrocuting surface is poorly established, the skin lesion that develops is called as it's a crocodile skin, jewel burn, bone pearl, or it's a spark lesion. Anyone? So basically, there is a gap between the burn and the skin. So yeah, if anyone can tell what is the answer here, I will just repeat. It's an electrical injury, and if the contact with the electrocuting surface is poorly established, the skin lesion that develops is called, and the options are crocodile skin, jewel burn, bone pearl, or it's a spark lesion. So yeah, I will tell the answer. Its answer here is D. That is the spark lesion. So yeah, whenever there is a space between the electrocuting surface, or it's electricity and the skin, we will see a spark lesion. And we all know about jewel burn. So yeah, jewel burn is basically so we all know about jewel burn. Jewel burn is basically when there is a firm contact between the burn as well as the electrical substance. So yeah, in this case it's a spark lesion and not the jewel burn. Am I audible? I know there is so much noise here, but yeah, if you can manage. So yeah, it's a spark lesion here. Then we have a crocodile skin. Crocodile skin is basically if there is a high voltage electricity, then only it will form multiple lesions, multiple electrical marks. That is the crocodile skin here. And jewel burn I told. And bone pearl is basically when the heat generated by the current may melt the calcium phosphate, which is radiologically seen as bone pearls. So yeah, next question we have this question. It's an anxious mother pregnant with twins was recently diagnosed with a twin transfusion syndrome. So yeah, she wants to know the possible fetal outcome of the pregnancy. So which of the following investigation can be used to predict this? And the options are it's a deepest vertical pocket, that is the USG. Then we have the fetal hemoglobin estimation. Then we have MPI, that is the ventricular Doppler. Or the last option is it's a peak systolic velocity, that's a MCA Doppler. So yeah, if anyone can tell, it's a case of twin transfusion syndrome. So yeah, how do you know it is? So yeah, so which of the following investigation can be used to predict the outcome of the pregnancy here? So yeah, if anyone wants to tell this, if you know, its options are deepest vertical pocket, that is USG, fetal hemoglobin estimation, MPI, that is the ventricular Doppler, peak systolic velocity, that is the MCA Doppler. So yeah, okay, I will only tell is the answer here is, if no one wants to tell, it's a C, that is the MPI. Basically, we are doing a ventricular Doppler here because see, cardiac activity is more important in case of any patient basically. So yeah, so if it's a twin pregnancy, that is a transfusion syndrome. So yeah, we will do a Doppler, that is a ventricular Doppler to assess the. Basically, we are doing a myocardial performance index, that is the MPI, what I told you. So yeah, the option A was deepest vertical pocket, that is USG. See, we do USG, but it's not for outcome of the pregnancy. It's basically for, we can tell it's for polyhydramnios or it's oligohydramnios in case of TTS. And next option was it's B and D, that is the fetal hemoglobin estimation and MCA Doppler. This will be used to detect the twin anemia polycythemia syndrome and not the case of the outcome of the pregnancy. So yeah, next we have it's a easy case, I think. Yeah. So which of the following is the most common congenital anomaly of the kidney? And the options are renal agenesis, renal duplication, horseshoe kidney, or it's a pancake kidney. So yeah, if anyone can tell which of the following is the most common congenital anomaly of the kidney: renal agenesis, renal duplication, horseshoe kidney, or it's a pancake kidney. Anyone? Most common congenital anomaly of. Okay, no one wants to tell. Okay, yeah. Okay, the answer here is C. That is the horseshoe kidney, which you have to remember. It's a horseshoe kidney. That is basically the most common congenital anomaly of the kidney here, and we can tell it's from 1 in 600 live births. So yeah, so it's a factual question again. You have to remember this. Next question we have, it's a pathological question. Biopsy is done for a chronic varicose lesion over the right cheek in an elderly man. It reveals the histological pattern given below. And what is the most likely diagnosis? So I'll just tell what is the histological picture here. Basically, we are seeing here is the keratin pearls. Yeah, keratin pearls. So now you can tell in which condition, in which pathology keratin pearls can be seen. And the options are basal cell carcinoma, squamous cell carcinoma, molluscum contagiosum, or it's a malignant melanoma. So yeah, anyone at least guess it out. A, B, C, D. So yeah, it's a chronic varicose lesion over the right cheek in an elderly man. That's okay, but the main important is that it's a keratin pearls. Yeah, keratin pearls is a diagnostic of what? SCC. Yeah, it's a squamous cell carcinoma. Yeah, squamous cell carcinoma is a diagnostic of keratin pearls is a diagnostic of squamous cell carcinoma. Next we have, it's a 5-month-old child who presents to you with a multiple episodes of epistaxis. So on examination, pinpoint ecchymosis around the hair follicle are also seen, and you perform a X-ray of the leg, and which suggests that it's a case of scurvy. So which of the following is false about this condition? So basically you have to tell which of the following is false about scurvy here. Options are microcytic anemia can be seen, the bleeding on ribs is non-tender and round, the patient can present with pseudoparalysis, or there is an impaired formation of mature connective tissue. So yeah, I will repeat, it's a case of scurvy, and which of the following is false, not true. It's what the following is false. Microcytic anemia is seen, bleeding on ribs is non-tender and round, patient can present with pseudoparalysis, or there is an impaired formation of mature connective tissue. Anyone wants to answer this case? It's a case of scurvy. Scurvy, it's a deficiency of vitamin C. So yeah, which of the following is not right? Which of the following is false? Anyone? Okay, I'll only tell the answer here is B. That is, the option B was the bleeding. That is the bleeding on the ribs. There will be bleeding on the. I was saying bleeding. Sorry, there will be a bleeding of the ribs. That is, there is a specific name for that. I think scurvy, and there is a bleeding of the ribs. That is scorbutic rosary. Yeah, I was talking about scorbutic rosary, and there is a bleeding of the ribs. So yeah, the answer is bleeding of the ribs is non-tender and round. But in scurvy, you see there is a that is sharp and tender pain will be there in case of scurvy in ribs. So yeah, that's where microcytic anemia can be seen. Yes, then it can present with pseudoparalysis, and there is an impaired formation of mature connective tissue. And that's all is right. Yeah, hello. So next question we have, it's a case of a 40-year-old male patient who presents to a clinic with a history of discharge from the perianal region for the past 1 week. So on examination you find that on external opening was seen at a 2 o'clock position around the anal orifice. So on per rectal examination, an opening was palpable at 3 o'clock position at the dentate line. So what is the gold standard investigation for assessing this patient? So you know it's a diagnosis of what, if you can tell this. Because diagnosis only you can just tell what is the investigation choice. I'll just repeat, it's a 40-year-old patient who comes to you with discharge in from the perianal region for the past 1 week. Examination you find there is an external opening is seen. See, there is an opening in the other than the external genitalia, it will be fistula, we all know. So yeah, it's a case of fistula, and on examination you see external opening at 2 o'clock position, and rectal examination you do, there is a palpable at 3 o'clock position at the dentate line. Because there is a fistula inside and the outside, but that is both ends there will be openings. So yeah, it's a case of anal fistula. So now you just tell me what is the investigation choice for anal fistula. Anyone? Anal fistula investigation choice: CT, MRI, endo-anal USG, or it's a fistulogram. I'll just repeat: CT, MRI, endo-anal USG, or fistulogram. Anyone wants to answer? gold standard investigation of. Okay, I'll just answer. It's a case of anal fistula, and what we are talking here is the investigation. So it's just gold standard investigation for anal fistula is MRI and not CT or because see, in MRI you find the muscles, in CT you find the bones, but not you can see both, but specifically in MRI you are for the muscles and going for the muscles. So yeah, you will check the anal fistula in MRI. Next question we have, it's a young man working in a rabbit farm presents with fever, lymphadenopathy and an ulcer on the hand and is diagnosed with a tularemia. So what is the drug of choice for this condition? Basically it's a case of tularemia, and what is the drug of choice for this condition? Options are amikacin, neomycin, kanamycin or just streptomycin. I repeat, amikacin, neomycin, kanamycin or just streptomycin. Anyone just tell me. Already they have given it's a case of tularemia. So in tularemia, what is the drug of choice? Basically tularemia is an infection, basically it's caused by Francisella tularensis. It's an aerobic gram negative bacteria. So yeah, so if what is the drug of choice for tularemia? Okay, the answer is streptomycin, and if not available, gentamicin can be used, but yeah, streptomycin is the drug of choice for tularemia. Yeah, that's it. Next we have, what is the most common cytogenetic change in children with myelodysplastic syndrome? And the options are 5q deletion, monosomy 5, 7q deletion or it's a monosomy 7. I will repeat, it's what is the most common cytogenetic change in a children with myelodysplastic syndrome? And the options are 5q deletion, monosomy 5, 7q deletion or it's a monosomy 7. Anyone can just try if you know what is a myelodysplastic syndrome, most common cytogenetic change. Anyone? Okay, the answer here is D. Yeah. See, monosomy 7 is the, you have to remember this, you have no choice. The monosomy 7 is basically the most common cytogenetic change in children with myelodysplastic syndrome. And if you think about adults, in adults we have 5q deletion. So yeah, in adults 5q deletion, and in children it is monosomy 7. So yeah, next is a big one. Yeah. Now a 2-year-old boy comes to you who presents with strabismus and leukocoria and is suspected to have a retinoblastoma. So you perform a B scan and you detect there is a multiple endophytic mass with calcification. The largest is measuring 6 dd and the smallest is 4 dd. So CT scan reveals intraocular foci of calcification and no other anomaly. So the ophthalmologist decide to use a chemoreduction and local therapy to treat this child. So according to the Rees-Elsworth classification, this belongs to which group? 1, 2, 3, 4. This happens. You know all the things at last. They just ask you like what is the classification here. Okay, just tell me diagnosis if you know. Diagnosis they are given retinoblastoma. So yeah, I will just repeat. It's a 2-year-old boy, strabismus, leukocoria, suspected to have a retinoblastoma. B scan was done, endophytic masses with calcification was present, and the largest is 6 dd, lowest smallest is the 4 dd. CT scan, there is an intraocular foci of calcification and no other anomaly, and you decide to use chemoreduction and local therapy to treat this child. So according to the Rees-Elsworth classification, this belongs to which group? Group 1, 2, 3 or 4. So yeah, anyone? Multiple tumors of 4 to 10. Basically it's a group 2. If you don't know the answer, it's a group 2. So to remember that basically it's a favorable tumor that is 4 to 10 dd or it's a behind the equator. So this question there is no choice, it's a classification here. So yeah, the next question we have, it's a case of a 35-year-old. It's a 35-year-old female who presents to the OPD with headache and high blood pressure. So on investigation, increased aldosterone levels with low renin levels are seen and a diagnosis of Cohen syndrome. So yeah, basically you have to know what is a Cohen syndrome, otherwise you won't be able to tell. And the question is basically it's excess secretion of aldosterone can cause all except. So the options are slight increase in ESF volume, increase in plasma Na plus greater than 7 milliequivalent per liter, or it's a hypertension, or the last option is it's a hypokalemia. So yeah, So yeah, anyone knows the answer here? It's a 35-year-old female, headache, high blood pressure. Investigation aldosterone levels with low renin levels are seen, and diagnosis of Conn syndrome is made. Excess secretion of aldosterone can cause all except slight increase in ESF, increase in plasma Na+, hypertension, or it's a hypokalemia. So if you can tell. Okay, I don't think anyone will tell this. Okay, so yeah, the answer here is excess secretion of aldosterone can cause all except it's an high, that is an increase in plasma sodium levels greater than 7 milliequivalent per liter. So yeah, basically it's a 4 to 6 milliequivalent, but they have given 7 milliequivalent per liter. So yeah, you have to think, tell. So yeah, basically I also don't know this question. I am also reading for the first time. So yeah, I will just read it off what it is there. So yeah, it's a Conn syndrome. Conn syndrome is a primary hyperaldosteronism. So in a Conn syndrome, there is a primary hyperaldosteronism. It is due to an aldosterone producing tumor of the zona glomerulosa, causing a loss of potassium by the kidneys, mild metabolic acidosis. There is a slight increase in extracellular fluid volume, or it's a modest increase in sodium levels, and hypertension. Basically, I also don't know this question. It's a new question for me also. And the question was, what is a Conn syndrome and what was the exception for this case? So yeah, I will also read about this Conn syndrome. Conn syndrome is basically it's a primary hyperaldosteronism. So yeah, next question we have, it's what is the most common gene mutation seen in patient with familial Parkinson disease? And the options are leucine-rich repeat kinase 2, Parkin, alpha-synuclein gene missense mutation, or it's a PTN-induced putative kinase. Anyone wants to tell this answer? Okay, I will just tell the question again. It's a case of a most common gene mutation seen in patient with familial Parkinson disease. It's a leucine-rich repeat kinase, Parkin, alpha-synuclein gene missense mutation. The last one, that is, it's a PTN-induced putative kinase. So yeah, if you can tell what is the most common gene mutation in Parkinson. Anyone wants to tell this answer? Yeah, anyone? Okay, I will only tell. See, the most common gene mutation seen in the Parkinson disease is, that is the first option, that is the leucine-rich repeat kinase 2. So yeah, it is the most common form of monogenetic familial Parkinson disease. So you have to remember that there is no choice. And if there is a mutation in alpha-synuclein, that is a PARK1, PARK4. But yeah, in this case they have asked it's a familial Parkinson disease. So in familial we have, it's a leucine-rich repeat kinase. So you have to remember this factual questions they are given. So yeah, next we have which of the following clinical features is not seen in a patient with ruptured ectopic pregnancy? And the options are shoulder tip pain, decidual cast, vertigo and syncope, shock index of 0.7. So yeah, I repeat, which of the following clinical features is not seen in patient with ruptured ectopic pregnancy? Shoulder tip pain, decidual cast, vertigo and syncope, or it's a shock index of 0.7. So yeah, if you can tell which of the following is not a... Today I think no one wants to answer, or I think okay, no one wants to answer, I think. Okay, the answer is D, that is a shock index, that is the greater than shock index of 0.7 is the wrong answer. So yeah, if there is a ruptured ectopic pregnancy, ectopic pregnancy, you know, when there is a, apart from uterus, you find the pregnancy, that is the fetus in other apart from the uterus, that is. So yeah, in case of ruptured, if it is a ruptured ectopic pregnancy, what you will not see, and we don't see a shock index of 0.7 because we see a shock index of greater than 0.85 and not 0.7. So yeah, next we have shoulder tip pain, decidual cast, and vertigo and syncope. Yeah, that are all the features of, see, we have the signs, that is, see, Danforth sign. So Danforth sign is basically the shoulder tip. Yeah, shoulder tip pain, I referred to pain in the shoulder tip, that is the Danforth sign. And because of it, it's because of the irritation of phrenic nerve. And then we have a decidual cast. That it is basically, it's a expulsion of decidua in a single piece to the cervix, that is a decidual cast. Okay. And we had vertigo and syncope. So in case of vertigo, yeah, anyone is there? Okay, yeah, sorry. So yeah, it's a question is over. Next question we have, it's a 24-year-old patient who has been given an intradermal injection of 0.7 ppd, that is the 5 tuberculin units, over the forearm. So after 72 hours, the site is examined as shown in the image below. So what is the interpretation of the result obtained? So yeah, I repeat, it's a 24-year-old patient who has been given intradermal injection, that is 0.1 ml ppd has been given. So yeah, in his forearms. So after 72 hours, the site is examined as shown in the image below. What is the interpretation of the result? Basically, it's in TB what you do. In TB what you do, it's a Montus test. It's a Montus test is it. And see, they have given an image here, so I cannot tell basically what. So I can just tell there is an induration that is greater than 10 millimeter, and that is a positive tuberculin test. Otherwise I cannot tell anything, but it's a image based question. So yeah, it's a tuberculin positive test suggestive of a recent or past infection. See, Montus test is not specific test, so you can't tell there is a recent or it's a past, because you cannot tell specifically for TB. So yeah, next we have, it's a 39-year-old man who speaks to himself, and there is a 39-year-old man who speaks to himself and complains of hearing two people talking about him. On examination, he has reduced affect and impaired judgment. So these clinical features have been present for about 3 weeks in the last month. So what is the likely diagnosis? So yeah, it's a schizophrenia, schizophreniform disorder, brief psychotic episode, or it's a schizoaffective disorder. So yeah, I will just repeat, it's a 39-year-old man who, because it's a psychiatric question, and in case of it's a psychiatric question, and in case of this case, it is a 39-year-old man who complains of hearing two people talking about him. So on examination, he has reduced affect and impaired judgment. So these clinical features suggestive of what are present from the last 3 weeks. So yeah, I will just tell the options. The options are schizophrenia, schizophreniform disorder, or it's a brief, that is a psychotic episode, or it's a schizoaffective disorder. So anyone wants to answer this question? Anyone? Okay, the answer, see, you might be thinking it's a dual personality, but it's not a dual personality case. It's not a schizophrenia. So yeah, the answer is C, that is, it's a brief psychotic episode. Why brief psychotic episode? Because they have given, and it has been present for about 3 weeks in the last month. So if it's a less than 30 days, that's a 1 month. At 3 weeks, it's a brief, but it's a chronic. So it's a brief psychotic episode. And yeah, what they have given, there will be a delusion, hallucination, thought disorder, disorganized or catatonic behavior. But see, in schizophrenia, you have to remember it's a bit dual personality, because it might be having hallucination and all that, but there will be both negative symptoms as well as positive symptoms in schizophrenia. So here only they have given just 3 thoughts. He hears about 2 people talking about him. So that's not schizophrenia here. So yeah, it's a case of, it is a brief psychotic episode. So yeah, they have given for schizophrenia they have given, it's like at least 6 months should be there. For schizophreniform disorder, they have written it's same symptoms as schizophrenia, but it will be between 1 to 6 months. And for brief, what the question is, that is less than 1 month. And it's a schizoaffective disorder, there should be active symptoms, that is the positive symptoms in that, with at least 2 weeks of lifetime history of delusion or hallucination in the absence of prominent mood symptoms. So yeah, now I think you get it what it is. So yeah, next question we can go through. Patient presents to the ER, that is emergency room, with a generalized tonic-clonic seizures, and he started on phenytoin therapy. So all of the following adverse effects can be expected in the patient except. So yeah, it's a multiple choice question here, and I will just repeat. It's a patient coming to the emergency room, generalized tonic-clonic seizures, and you are starting a phenytoin therapy. So all of the following adverse effects can be expected in this patient except lymphadenopathy, ataxia, hypercalcemia, hirsutism, or it's a hyperglycemia. So anyone, if you want to answer this? Lymphadenopathy, ataxia, hypercalcemia, hirsutism, or hyperglycemia? It's a multiple choice question. Adverse effects of phenytoin. Anyone? Okay, the answer here is C. I will just tell. See, lymphadenopathy will be there as an adverse effect, Then we had ataxia. Ataxia also we have. See, hypercalcemia we don't have in phenytoin. You have to remember it's not hypercalcemia, it's a hypocalcemia in that. And yeah, hirsutism we see the adverse effect. And the last one was hypoglycemia. No, we don't see hypoglycemia, it's a hyperglycemia. So see, hyperglycemia and hypocalcemia and all lymphadenopathy, ataxia, hirsutism, that will we have to see. So yeah, next question we go through. It's a 7-year-old boy who is weight is 30 kgs and has been posted for surgical resection of a tumor. What is the daily maintenance fluid required for this child while he is NPO? And the options are 1000 ml, 1700 ml, 2500 ml, or it's a 3000 ml. I repeat, it's a 7-year-old boy weighing 30 kgs and it has been posted for surgical resection of a tumor. So what is the daily maintenance of fluid required while he is NPO? 1000 ml, 1700, 2500, or it's a 3000. Just guess if you don't know the answer at least. Anyone? There was a formula, I think. Yeah, it's a formula is there. So yeah, it's a 30 kg boy. So yeah, if there is a 30 kg boy, the formula what we use here basically it's a 1500 ml plus 20 ml into weight more than 20 kgs. So yeah, we have read it's a basically it's a, I remember it's a basically for fluid administration we have the formulas like if it's from 0 to 10 kg we use 1000 ml per kg, and if it is from 11 to 20 kg we use 1000 ml plus 50 ml per kg of each greater than 10 kg, and whereas if it's greater than 20 kg we use 1500 ml plus 20 ml per kg for each kg greater than 20 kg. So yeah, it's a formula in pediatrics we know, we have read many times, and we can tell it as a Holiday-Seger method. So yeah, fluid requirement per day. So in this condition it will be 1700 ml because see 30 kg is there, that is more than 20 kg. That's so for 20 we had 1500 ml. Yeah, more than 20 we had 1500 ml and 10 kg extra here. So yeah, 1500 ml plus 20 ml for each kg, that is 20 ml into 10. So yeah, it's 200. So 1500 ml plus 200, that is 1700 ml. So yeah, I have to remember this formula. Next we have it's a orthopedic. I think you can tell it's a Bennett fracture. So in case of a Bennett fracture, it is difficult to maintain in a reduced state due to the pull of what? So yeah, if you can tell this, it's a Bennett fracture and it is very difficult to maintain in a reduced state due to the pull of flexor pollicis longus, abductor adductor pollicis brevis, extensor pollicis longus, or it's a abductor pollicis longus. Anyone? Just try. I think today. Okay, just try if you want. Flexor pollicis longus, adductor pollicis brevis, extensor pollicis longus, or it's a abductor pollicis longus. Anyone? It's a first metacarpal fracture, if you know. Bennett fracture. Yeah, it's the start of the first metacarpal fracture. And yeah, anyone? Okay, I will tell. The answer there is D, that is the abductor pollicis longus. See, in abductor pollicis longus, basically it is attached from the first metacarpal only. So yeah, again I can just tell what's that only. The answer is abductor pollicis longus, which will not be able to put the fracture in reduced state. It will be pulling. So when a tendon or the muscle pulls, so you can't keep it in the reduced state. So you have to put a cast or something. You have to immobilize this area. So yeah, in case of Bennett fracture, it is abductor pollicis longus. Next we have it's a 10-year-old girl who has just started menstruating. So under which of the following national program she will be provided with a pack of sanitary pack by the ASA worker in her village? And the options are Janani Suraksha Yojana, Rashtriya Kishore Swasthya Karyakram, Sukanya Samriddhi Yojana, or it's a Kishori Shakti Yojana. So yeah, it's a PSM. If you know, you can tell. It's a, I'll just repeat. Yeah, okay. So I'll just repeat. It's a 10-year-old girl who has just started menstruating. So under which of the following national programs she will be provided with a pack of sanitary napkins by the ASA workers in her village? It's a Janani Suraksha Yojana, Rashtriya Kishore Swasthya Karyakram, Sukanya Samriddhi Yojana, or it's a Kishori Shakti Yojana. Anyone? If you want to tell. Janani Suraksha Yojana, Rashtriya Kishore Swasthya Karyakram, Sukanya Samriddhi Yojana, or it's a Kishori Shakti Yojana. Okay, I will tell its answer is B, that is the Rashtriya Kishore Swasthya Karyakram. That is a menstrual hygiene scheme. Under that So it provides the sanitary napkins for the girls who are menstruating in the village. So yeah, and see, it's next option we have Sukanya. That is Sukanya Samriddhi Yojana. It's a saving program. Yeah, it's a saving program for a parent of a girl who is less than 10 years of age. So it's for marriage and future education. That's for that college education, marriage. And then we had a Kishori Shakti Yojana. It empowers the adolescent girls so to take charge of their lives. So yeah, we have done the. So your answer to is Rashtriya Kishore Swasthya Yojana Karyakram. Sorry for that. So next question we will go. It's a study conducted among smokers. It shows that 80% of the cases of lung cancer are due to cigarette smoking. So which of the following variables indicate this? And the options are risk ratio, relative risk, attributable risk, or it's a population attributable risk. Am I going fast or it's okay? I think I'm going somewhat faster. Okay, I'll just repeat this question. It's a PSM question. So yeah, the question is, it's a study conducted among the smokers. In a study conducted among the smokers, it shows 80% of the cases are lung cancer due to cigarette smoking. So which of the following variables indicate this? That is a risk ratio, relative risk, attributable risk, or it's a population attributable risk. Anyone wants to try? It's A, B, C, D. Okay. Basically, it's I'll just tell the answer here. It's a C. That is the attributable risk is in this condition because you are basically, it's a exposure. So you are exposing yourself to cigarette smoking. So when you consider it in that case, it's attributable. Attributable means you are attributed something to someone. That is something to someone. So yeah, in this case, it is cigarette smoking to a smoker, to the lung. That is. So yeah, it's a attributable risk which indicates to what extent the disease under study can be attributed to the exposure. Hence, cigarette smoking is attributed to be the cause of 80% of the lung cancer. So yeah. Okay, next we have, it's a patient with renal failure who develops vomiting in the ICU. ABG analysis shows pH 7.4, sodium 145, chlorine 100, HCO3 24, or PaCO2 40. So what is a likely metabolic abnormality? See, ABG question every time. In every module also I am discussing ABG question is coming every time. ABG will be coming, and one OBG also okay, I'll just discuss this. And it's a case of what? Normal ABG, normal anion gap metabolic acidosis, or it's a high anion metabolic acidosis with metabolic alkalosis, or it's a high anion gap metabolic alkalosis with normal metabolic acidosis. So yeah, ABG questions are difficult anyway, but yeah, you have to learn this. So pH is 7.4. That is, pH is low. Yes, no? Yeah, pH is low. See, and sodium is 145, chloride is 100, HCO3 is 24, and PCO2 is 40. So yeah. So basically, you have to detect the anion gap. In this condition, anion gap, you know, there is one formula. It is sodium plus, chloride, sodium minus chloride plus HCO3 minus. So yeah, it's coming up 21. Basically, whatever the figures are there. So yeah, it's a 21. So normal anion gap is 8 to 16, and here it is a 21. So it's a high anion gap. So yeah, if there is a high anion gap, you have to remember one thing. It's a case of metabolic acidosis in case of renal failure, and vomiting is, and that will cause metabolic alkalosis. So yeah. So you have to learn this ABG. In ABG we have many formulas for that. So you have to calculate the formulas, and then you have to detect the pH is what and chloride is what and all that. So yeah, the answer is high anion gap, because 21 is the high anion with metabolic alkalosis, because there is a high anion gap acidosis which is common in renal failure causing metabolic alkalosis. So yeah, next question we have, it's an image based question basically. So the question is, what is the most common cause of the condition shown below? So I cannot just tell what is the cause, but I can just tell what is the image given here. So yeah, it's an inflammatory skin disease affecting 90% of the body surface area. Okay, I'll just tell it. It's a erythroderma. So yeah, so it's a case of erythroderma, and you have to tell here what is the most common cause of the erythroderma. And the options are psoriasis, eczema, Drugs, or it's a cutaneous lymphoma. So yeah, I think you can tell this answer. It's not that difficult. So what is the most common cause of erythroderma? Options are psoriasis, eczema, drugs, or it's a cutaneous lymphoma. So yeah, if you can tell the answer. Today I think no one is active. Okay. Okay, the answer is, I will only tell it's B. That is, eczema is the most common cause for erythroderma. So yeah, erythroderma, I just tell it's an inflammatory skin disease which is affecting more than 90%. Yeah, more than 90% of the body surface area. And the most common causes, as I told, it's eczema. Then we have psoriasis, lymphoma, drugs. So the most common is eczema. So the last three questions, I think. Yeah, last three questions for today. So in children, what is the most common cause of suprasellar enlargement with calcification? Options are craniopharyngioma, astrocytoma, Radke-Cleft cyst, or it's a suprasellar tuberculoma. So I repeat, in children, what is the most common cause of suprasellar enlargement with calcification? Options were craniopharyngioma, astrocytoma, Radke-Cleft cyst, or it's a suprasellar tuberculoma. Anyone wants to answer this? Anyone? It's a basically anatomy question. Not anatomy, it's a pediatric question here. But yeah, if you know what is the most common cause of suprasellar enlargement with calcification. Okay, the answer is A. That is, it's a craniopharyngioma is the right answer. The craniopharyngioma is basically a benign tumor. It's a benign neoplasm. You can tell it arises from the suprasellar region. Suprasellar region is, it's a part of the skull. In skull we have, I can show you the part actually. And yeah, it's they are derived from Radke-Cleft and have bimodal age distribution and calcification is a characteristic feature. So yeah, it's A is the right answer. That is craniopharyngioma is the right answer. So yeah, it has Radke-Cleft and calcification is a characteristic feature here. Next we have which of the following drugs is the intravenous induction agent of choice in a patient with history of myocardial infarction? Options are etomidate, thiopentone, propofol, or it's a ketamine. So yeah, it's an easy question. It's a question that is, which of the following drugs is the intravenous induction agent of choice in a patient with history of myocardial infarction? Options are etomidate, thiopentone, propofol, or ketamine. Anyone wants to answer? Intravenous induction agent of choice. It's a anesthesia question, if you know. Okay, I will tell. Its answer is A. That is, etomidate is the right answer. See, etomidate is basically in anesthesia. I have to see. It's a cardiac stable. If it's a cardiac stable anesthesia, it will not cause any arrhythmia in the patient after the OT also. So you have to think like that. If there is a history of already cardiac problems is there, so you have to think in that way, which is a cardiac stable anesthesia. So yeah, it's a etomidate in this condition. So yeah, etomidate is the right answer here. So yeah, next question is, yeah, C. What was C? No, propofol. No, propofol we don't give. Propofol we don't give because when propofol basically cardiac depression is seen. But here we have to basically check for a cardiostable anesthesia. So the answer is etomidate and not just propofol. And next question we have it's a 53-year-old man was evaluated for painless lymphadenopathy. So you do a biopsy, you see there is a homogeneous population of small lymphocytes with cleaved nuclear contours. So which translocation is the pathognomic of this condition? It's T1814, T1418, T1118, or it's a T1114. So basically you have to tell what your diagnosis before that. So I'll just tell it's a 53-year-old man, painless lymphadenopathy, homogeneous population of small lymphocytes with cleaved nuclear contouring biopsy. So which translocation is this? But tell me what is the diagnosis here, because the main thing it is here, it's a homogeneous population of small lymphocytes with cleaved nuclear contours. And see, if there is a lymphadenopathy, you think it is a lymphoma, but it's a malignancy is there. If there is a lymphadenopathy, that is, it is a painless. So yeah, here the condition is mantle cell lymphoma, what I'm talking about. So here the options were T1814, T1418, T1118, or it's a T1114. So yeah, I can just tell what is the translocation in the mantle cell carcinoma. Yeah, mantle cell carcinoma. So yeah, anyone? Okay, I will only tell it's a D, right? It's a T1114. So in case of a mantle cell carcinoma, what we are discussing here, it's a T1114 gene mutation. Translocation T1114. Next we have last question for today. We have a patient with facial nerve palsy who is presented with dry eye. So injury to which part of the facial nerve will produce this symptom? And the options are geniculate ganglion, tympanic segment, mastoid segment, or it's a choroid tympani. So I'll repeat, it's the last question. That is the patient with facial nerve palsy. It's a patient with facial nerve palsy and it presents with a dry eye injury. So injury to which of the facial nerve will produce these symptoms? Options were geniculate ganglion, tympanic segment, mastoid segment, or it's a choroid tympani. So anyone wants to answer? You can just tell A, B, C, D, because the last question I will also not tell. I don't tell also. Yeah. So yeah. If it's a case of dry eye, that is normally what we give. It's a case of dry eye also. In a patient comes to you with a if a patient comes to you with a itching also, so you think it is because of dry eye. So in dry eye, what you give? You give basically you give a lubricant. But it is not a case. I'm just telling about it. It's you give a lubricant and that to carboxymethyl to give. But yeah, in this condition, which part of the facial nerve will produce a dry eye? So the answer is geniculate ganglion. So to remember this, it will produce a geniculate ganglion with injury will produce dry eye in case of a facial nerve palsy, and that too it will cause decreased lacrimation. So yeah, we have completed for today. So okay, thank you so much, and we will meet you at 11 o'clock. Thank you.